everyone, and welcome back to the CLSR. And I'm your host, the counselor. Just want to let you people know you can get a hold of me at TheCounselor That's the counselor at gmail.com. Now, I want to say to all my wonderful listeners out there, let's continue to spread the word like the wise old bird and put your money where your mouth is so we can handle this biz. Take care. Welcome back to the CLSR, and I'm your host, the counselor. And today we're going to be talking about strengths and weaknesses. You see, many people are asked to define their strengths and their weaknesses. However, I find it extremely challenging to answer that question when you're put on the spot. And when was the last time you really thought about your strengths and weaknesses? I mean, do you even really know what they are? Many of us are being told what our strengths and weaknesses are, and usually they don't really define us. We just accept them and we go with the flow. And why is it important to understand your strengths and weaknesses? I think in this world of complexity, it's really important to emphasize your strengths because we're dealing in a society where there's so much influence out there, negative influence, that point out your weaknesses. And sometimes we have a tendency to be insecure. They say that 75% of the people out there are walking around quite insecure about themselves. And I think the reason why this is because they don't have a true definition or understanding of their strengths and weaknesses. And remember, when you do have weaknesses, you can strengthen them. So that's a good news. And I mean, sometimes when you are told what your weaknesses are, you buy into that. And I think it's important today that we identify what could be our strengths and our weaknesses. And there's really a procedure that you can follow to identify your strengths and weaknesses. And first, I have to understand that everyone's different, everyone's unique, and no two people have the same strengths and weaknesses. Now, keeping that in mind, your strength can complement someone else's weakness. So working together sometimes could be very beneficial to both people. See, if you have a partner and you have strengths in one area and they have weaknesses in another, you can capitalize on that and make the situation better. See, knowing where you come in strong and where you need assistance can help you stabilize your personal life and actually nurture your professional interactions if you really think about it. Self knowledge is a powerful tool that too many people disregard because it's difficult or inconvenient, or perhaps because it makes them feel uncomfortable. What seems like strengths to one person, moreover, might not necessarily seem that useful to others. And this can make figuring out whether specific qualities you possess are strengths as opposed to weaknesses confusing or frustrating. Either or. So while this is something you will have to figure out mostly on your own, there are exercises you can do to identify your strengths and weaknesses for a job or for personal reasons. There are also some tips that I'm going to talk about, like practical tactics, where you could find them and identify either your strengths and your weaknesses that could help you in the job. First, it's important to understand your abilities. Appreciate your effort. Because you are willing to take a good look at where you are already strong and where you could stand some improvement, you are a strong person already. It takes guts to sit down and do this work. Give your awesome self a pat on the back and remember that you are an amazing person. Write down what you do. You see, in order to identify your strengths and weaknesses, think about the activities you either participate in the most or get the most pleasure out of. Spend a week or so writing down all the activities you do throughout a given day, rating them from 1 to 5, depending upon how much you enjoy doing or participating in them. Studies have found journaling to be a great method for becoming more self aware and reflective towards one's personal strengths and desires. This can be as simple as listing all the most memorable moments of a given day to writing detailed narratives
about your deepest thoughts and desires. The more you come to know yourself, the easier it will be for you to identify your personal strengths. Like, when was the last time you reflected on your values? Well, if it hasn't been a while, I think it's time that we take some time and reflect on those values. Like, sometimes it can be difficult to identify our strengths and weaknesses because we haven't taken the time to clarify our core values. Now, these are the beliefs that shape how you think about yourself, others, and the world around you. They are fundamental to your way of approaching life. Taking some time to identify your values will help you decide whether aspects of your life are strengths or weaknesses to you, regardless of what others may feel about them. Think about a few people you respect. What do you admire about them? What traits do they possess that you value? How do you see these in your own life? Imagine you could change one thing about your community. What would it be and why? What do you think that shows about what's most important to you? Remember a moment in your life where you felt very satisfied or fulfilled. What was that moment? What happened? Who were you with? Why did you feel that way? Imagine that your house is on fire. All pets are safe. And you can save just 3 objects. What would you save? And why? You need to examine your responses for these themes and patterns in your life. Once you've reflected on your values, examine the responses for things that may repeat. For example, perhaps admire Bill Gates or Richard Branson for their entrepreneurial spirit and creativity, right? The creativity that these people have, is tremendous. People look up to these people. See, this suggests that you may value ambition, competition, and ingenuity. Perhaps you would change the poverty in your community so everyone has a home and food. This suggests you may have value in your community, you like to help others in society and make a difference, you can have several core values. You can find lists of value words if you look them up. They're everywhere. Find some value words and write them down about yourself. You can go online if you need to. Do a little bit of research because they do apply to you in some way. You just got to look for them. Now, determine whether your life aligns with your values. You see, sometimes we may feel like we have a weakness in a particular area when our lives don't align with our core values for whatever reason. Living a life aligned with your values is called value congruent living, and it can lead to greater feelings of satisfaction and success. For example, perhaps you value ambition and competition, but you feel stuck at a dead end job where you're never challenged or given an opportunity to prove yourself. You might feel that you have a weakness in this area because your life isn't currently aligned with what's very important to you. Or perhaps you are a new mother who really wants to go back to your job as a teacher because you value intellectual status. You might feel that being a good mom is a weakness because your value, like of achieving intellectual status, appears to conflict with one another value. Okay? That family orientedness, In this case, you can figure out how to balance your values so that you honor both. Wanting to go back to your job doesn't mean you don't also want to enjoy your new child. Keep that into consideration and consider situational meanings. Think about what constitutes strength or weakness relative to the social conventions or customs within your local context. Social conventions are a set of rules governing interpersonal interaction which have been established as functional within a certain geological area or culture, hopefully so as to help maintain healthy social boundaries. See, knowing how these differ, depend on where you live, can help you determine what might be seen as a strength or weakness in that particular geographic location. Like, for example, if you live in a rural area where everyone works with their hands, the members of this community will likely value attributes related to physical labor and working long hours during the day. If you happen to live in a large city, however, these attributes might not appear as important unless you happen to work some other manual labor job. Consider whether or not the environment you live in is conducive to your own strengths and personal attributes. If they aren't, think about how you can either change the situation or move to an environment within which your personal strengths might be more highly valued or appreciated by others. Think. And see, there's going to be times where you might have to perform a reflective self exercise. Find people to ask. To help you figure out what your strengths and weaknesses are, you can do a reflective best self, which is the RBS exercise. This helps you figure out what others think about you in order to help you find your strengths. To start, think of people in every aspect of your life. Include people from work, old jobs, and former professors or teachers, as well as friends and family. Thinking of people to ask in all different areas will help you assess your personality on many levels and within many situations. And I do suggest you ask for feedback. Once you've chosen your candidate, send them an email asking them about your strengths. Ask them to give you particular instances where they saw you use those strengths. Make sure to mention that these strengths can be skill based or personality based. Both kinds of responses are important. Email is typically the best way to do it because it takes the pressure off of doing it on the spot. Give them time to think of a response and allow them to be more honest. Plus, it helps to have it all in writing for your later analysis. And look for commonalities. Once you've received all the results, you need to look for things that are similar in them. Read through each response and think about what it means. Try to pull out what traits each person is pinpointing and read the specific instance to see if any other traits arise. After you interpret them all, compare them to another and find similar traits that many people mention. It might help to make a table with a column for the name of the trait, a column for each response, and a column for interpretation. For example, multiple people in your life told you that you handle things well under pressure, are good in a crisis, and can help manage other people in stressful situations. This means that you can stay calm under pressure, and you're likely a strong and natural leader. You can also read it as you're a compassionate person when it comes to others. You are considered a people person. Now, I would like you to be a little bit creative and make a self portrait. Once you have all the results, write a self portrait analysis of your strengths. Make sure to incorporate all the different aspects that people pinpointed in their discussion of you and any traits you brought out in your own analysis. This isn't meant to be a complete psychological profile, but an in depth portrait of your best self. It reminds you of the characteristics you use when you are at your best and can help lead your future actions on how to strive to use them more. See, it's important to list those actions. Write about your actions. Consider how you respond in certain situations that require action, thought, and insight. Before doing anything more concrete, try to monitor the spontaneous reactions to experiences you had in your life already. Buy or acquire a journal to write your thoughts in. See, the reason for doing this is that the spontaneous reactions tell you a lot about how you react in both ordinary and intense situations. You can write them down to help you decipher your actions and abilities. And think of a challenging situation in which something bad happened. Perhaps it's being in a car crash or a child suddenly dashing out in front of a car while you slam on your brakes. How did you react when confronted with the spontaneous situation? Did you clam up and retreat, or did you meet the challenge and head on, assembling tools and resources to address the situation? If you took control and acted as a leader, you probably feel that courage and being able to handle these situations is a strength. If you reacted by crying uncontrollably, feeling helpless, or lashing out at others, staying in self control during a challenging situation might be a weakness. Make sure to consider things from several angles, like feeling helpless after a car crash is a perfectly natural reaction to the stress of the experience. But if you went to ask for help from someone, this suggests that asking others for help, like the collaboration, could be a strength. You do not always have to do everything yourself to be strong. Find a less challenging situation if you need to. I need you to think about a time when you faced a hard decision, but one that wasn't so life and death. Like, how did you react when you enter a crowded room? Do you want to engage everyone you meet there, or do you want to find a quiet corner away from the noise and connect with just one person? The person connecting with others is a strong. They're very strong at socializing and being extroverted, while the quieter person is strong at connecting individually and listening. Both these strengths can be used to the person's natural advantage. I also think it's important for you to consider times when you face a difficult personal situation. Think of a time when you've been put on the spot and had to react immediately. How quickly did you learn and adapt to the new situation? Are you a fast thinker, rattling off a great comeback when a coworker makes a snide remark? Or do you tend to absorb and think and then react in those situations? Remember that any strength you might have developed can sometimes have trade offs. If you spend most of your life alone reading and writing, you might not be as apt at small talk as other people, but you will probably have a knack for finding the plot of a book and discussing deep topics with others. You also may have grown up with younger siblings, which means you may be compassionate and patient and good at diffusing situations. It's important to keep in mind that the world needs many different people with different types of strengths and interests in order to be as diverse as it is. You don't necessarily need to be good at everything, just at what you consider important for yourself. The person who rattles off a brilliant comeback or who solves a problem quickly may have quick wittedness as a strength and perhaps focus on fine detail as a weakness. The person who takes time to think could be described as having planning as a strength and perhaps limited numbness as a weakness. So, listing your desires, keep that in mind because it is important. I need you to ask yourself about your desires. Your desires or longings say a lot about you, even if you've been spending a lot of time denying them. Consider why you want to complete those activities or goals and what it will take to reach them. Chances are these are your passions and dreams in life, which are typically areas of great strength. Many people fall into the trap of doing what their families want and becoming a doctor or a lawyer when they'd rather have been a ballet dancer or a mountain trekker instead. In a different section of your journal, write down your desires or life's longings. Ask yourself, what are my desires in life? Whether you're applying for your first job or have just settled into retirement, you should always have goals and yearnings in life. Determine what drives you and what makes you happy. When was the last time you really thought about that? I want you to decide what you enjoy. Begin to task yourself and ask yourself. Do you understand? Start acting on what you're thinking, right? Think about the things you most enjoy in life. Write down the answers to the question, what types of activities do I feel satisfying or appealing, about? Like, for some people, sitting by the fire with their Labrador retriever by their side is extremely satisfying. However, for others, they'd rather be rock climbing or taking a road trip or traveling across the world. Make a list of the activities or things you do that make you happy and provide you with pleasure. Most likely, these areas where you find your hobbies are some strong areas for you. And consider what motivates you. Along with your desires, you need to decide what keeps you motivated in life. In your journal, write down your answers to the question, when do I feel energized and motivated? Consider times in your life when you feel ready to take the world on by storm or inspired to go to the next level. The areas that inspire and motivate you are typically where you are strongest. Note that many people feel desired very early on in life, indicating the childlike self-knowledge that many come to lose when family, peer, and social expectations or financial pressures push the initial desires down deep. Now, I want you to assess your strengths and weaknesses. These strengths and weaknesses need to be thought about. Rethink your weaknesses. Weaknesses isn't the most helpful way to think about areas for develop. In reality, people really aren't weak, even though we might really feel or think this way at times. However, most people feel that they could be stronger in certain areas in their lives. Their skill sets in other areas are important, but these are areas that they feel they can improve upon. See, since they feel they are not as strong in those areas, it's common to assign the opposite to describe when we feel we need to work on an area to feel stronger and competent. Instead of focusing on weakness, which has a negative feel to it, think about your areas for growth or improvement. This keeps you focused on the future and what you could do better. Weaknesses could be conceived as something about yourself that you either have the power to improve, insofar as they are all related to your desires, or perhaps simply not relevant to your desires or goals in life whatsoever. Acknowledging either one is acceptable. Weaknesses are not permanent aspects of ourselves, but instead are changeable aspects of how we do things so we can become even more excellent and identifying your areas of growth. Areas in which you can develop might be related to anything, including certain professional or social skills or poor self restraint with food. You could also simply refer to an inability to catch a baseball or perform math equations quickly. Oftentimes, areas for growth are framed in terms of learning lessons from life and not repeating mistakes. Other times, it's about making the effort to overcome a lack of skills you perceive in yourself. However, an apparent weakness may merely be an indication that a particular activity just isn't for you. It's not for you, which can be an important thing to admit to yourself. If everyone had the ability to be good at or even enjoyed all of the same activities, then the world would likely be a very boring place. So try to focus on your strengths. Some might consider focusing on personal weaknesses at all as a waste of time or even misframing of the issues. Instead, focus primarily on your strengths and try to cultivate these whenever possible. This can be a better approach than identifying personal weaknesses, since what people typically refer to as weakness are often simply related to a lack of interest or desire to improve. It might be best for you to focus most on your personal strengths and desires and go from there. Be generous when you are acknowledging your strength because you most likely have plenty, even in areas where you feel weak. Then zero in on areas where you feel you can be more efficient. Like, if you want to work on becoming more assertive, first start with what assertiveness skills are. What are these assertiveness skills? You know what I mean? That you might be doing already. Maybe you have troubles saying no, but instead you have the ability to state your intentions in a way where, you know, it's understood and you can spare those feelings. You know what I mean? And get that person to, not be offended. Think about aspects of your personality that you consider strengths: being kind, generous, open minded, or a good listener. These are important strengths to have and can relate to your overall abilities that might get overlooked. Be conscious of these and take pride in them. Another way to think about strengths is to consider them talents or innate abilities and desires that fit with your sense of self and vision for the future. In other words, these are the things that you'd say, it wasn't effort. I've always had the ability to do some kind of activity well. Those are statements that people make. So I can't even emphasize enough writing down your strengths and weaknesses. Once you assess all you've written down about your actions and desires, it's time to focus on what you think your strengths and weaknesses are. Using the list from other people you got earlier and that what you have learned about yourself through other exercises, write down areas of your work and life that you think are strong and weak areas. Focus on how you currently see your own strengths and weaknesses based on what you're doing in your life right now, both personal and professional, rather than looking to the past or to your desires. Remember, no one is grading you or judging you based on your responses. So be honest with yourself. It might help to draw these two columns that you need to analyze strengths and weaknesses. Write them down as they come to you. Compare the list against one another. Did they match up? And did you find any surprises? Did you think you were strong in one area, but in your actions list, that doesn't appear to be the case? This type of mismatch occurs when you're telling yourself you're one way, but a challenging situation displays your real character instead. Now, how about mismatches between your desires and what you think your strengths are? This mismatch can happen where you've tried to do things with your life based on others' expectations or on your own ideas about what ought to be done, while your desires and actual reactions have been considerably different. And consider any surprises or mismatches. Look at the different lists you've made. Look for any surprises or places that don't match up. Reflect on why you think some of the qualities and weaknesses you've spotted have turned out to be different. Is it possible that you think you enjoy certain things or that you're motivated by certain things, but in actuality you can't or you aren't? These lists will help you see that. Focus on those areas that differ and try to identify situations that address the area. Remember, did you write that you aspire to become a singer, but on your list of believed strengths you said that you were good at science or medicine? While a singing doctor might be a novelty, the two professions differ considerably. Figure out which area really motivates you in the long term. Ask the opinions of friends or family. Have a close friend or family member provide you with constructive feedback. Although self examination can lead you to a few answers, getting an outside opinion will help you either solidify your observations or can shatter a few illusions as well. Learning how to receive constructive feedback from others is essential to being part of a community. It's important not to get defensive or take it as a personal attack. Simply because someone suggests an area of improvement, don't get too offended. Learning to incorporate constructive feedback from others into your everyday life can be a strength in itself. See, if you don't think that a family member can be honest, choose someone who will give you the truth and not sugarcoat or gloss over your weaknesses. Find an external neutral person, preferably a peer or a mentor, to give you honest, constructive feedback. Ask for feedback on your list. Have your outside person review and comment on your list. Helpful comments and questions may include: what makes you think that you don't act quickly in emergency situations? The outside observer may recall an instance where you were the hero of the day during an emergency, or you responded very well, although you may have forgotten this. And as always, the counselor is always going to say, seek professional assistance if necessary. There are a lot of people who really spend their lives educating themselves and pulling together resources and knowledges for the betterment of people. So if you are still having trouble or would feel more comfortable with an outside source, ask a professional to help you to determine your strengths and weaknesses. There are companies that can, with psychological profiling, which are often attached to recruiting agencies. For a price, you can take tests to have on-staff psychologists review your personality and professional profiles. Now, while these tests won't necessarily give you the essence of your personality, they can nonetheless serve as helpful jump-off points for thinking about your strengths and weaknesses. From this, you should find out what they consider to be your strengths and weaknesses. A good test should be long in order to draw out the repeated aspects of your personality. After taking a test like this, be sure to talk directly with the psychologist to work out weaknesses and uncover strengths. There are online tests you can take to assess your strengths and weaknesses as well. Look for tests that are they're on reputable sites and that have been compiled by licensed psychologists or similarly qualified professionals. If there's a cost involved, do some research about the company providing the test first to make sure you're getting value for your money, and reflect on your findings. You're going to find different things, so reflect on them. After you assess your strengths and weaknesses, spend some time to reflect and determine how you feel about what you found. Decide if you need or want to work on any of your weaknesses and contemplate what you will need to do to attack or change these weaknesses. Enlist in a class or find activities that will address your weaknesses. Like, if you find that you become a deer in the headlights when confronted with spontaneous situations, put yourself in situations where spontaneity occurs. Examples would include like joining a community theater, participating on a sports team, or doing karate at the bar. Consider therapy or ways to talk about fears or concerns. If taking a class or joining a theater group doesn't seem to do the trick, or you have deep rooted fears or anxieties that prevent you from moving forward, consider talking with the therapist and reject this perfection. There's too many people out there worrying about being perfect in certain areas of their lives. Take care not to become hung up on your weaknesses. This pattern can quickly fall into the non constructive pattern of perfectionism, which can actually hold you back from success. It's better to begin with what you do well for a given skill set, then find several details to enhance these skills and slowly improve over time. Like, you want to improve your communication skills. After some self reflection, you decide you are actually a pretty good listener, which is your strength. However, you clam up when it's your turn to speak, which is your weakness. You can decide you want to be more verbal, so you work on interjecting maybe a sentence or two within the conversation at small pauses. A perfectionist approach might say that because you are not currently good at speaking, you can't even bother to work on it because you'll make mistakes. Acknowledge that mistakes are part of learning and growth and allow yourself to make them as you develop yourself. And don't deny important moments in your life. Everyone has things in their life that they excel at. There are times when you do something you've never done before, but it just clicks and you find that you're a total natural at it. This might be a sport, art, creative pursuits, interacting with animals, or standing in for someone who's away, or doing their job. Not everyone will experience the same amazing moments as you, but when you have them, work with it to enhance your life and reach your true potential. And I always suggest try once you narrow down some of these skills, like if you understand some strengths, use them. Apply them to real life, like in an interview. Consider the relevancy of your strengths and weaknesses. You can use all you've learned about yourself to help you in job interviews. Think about how your strengths and weaknesses are relevant to the particular job you're applying for. In order to prepare, think about what tasks might be required for the job you are applying for, and consider all of the times throughout your life when you were faced with this similar task, which personal attributes seemed like they'd be either strengths or weaknesses while you were involved in these tasks. Like if you're applying to be a computer programmer, talk about your strengths that relate to computers or problem solving. However, it might not be especially pertinent to go into detail about your strengths regarding ping pong, unless this is something the employer seems to have an interest for it already. And exhibit honesty and confidence, right? When you're asked about these characteristics in an interview, be honest when describing your strengths. When interviews ask about your strengths and weaknesses, which you know they always do, they aren't merely curious about your skills, but also want to know how competent you are at talking about yourself. Social skills and an ability to market yourself is quickly becoming one of the most important sets of skills for most jobs in the workforce. For an interview, this begins with how well the interviewee is able to describe his or her strengths and weaknesses and how comfortable they appear doing so. And practice your interviewing skills. A lot of you think, oh, I got an interview coming up. So you wait until that last minute, start talking to yourself in the mirror, and you know that's no good. So I always strongly recommend when you got something coming up, practice, practice, practice. I said practice, practice, practice. I can't even say that enough. So in order to become more comfortable with this, practice interviewing with someone else. Ask a friend to interview you and practice describing yourself to him or her. Do this as many times as with as many people as possible until you start to feel more comfortable describing your strengths and weaknesses to them. At first, it might seem like reading a script, But after a while, it should start to feel more and more natural. Before going into the interview, think of as many concrete instances to talk about through which your personal strengths will be made apparent. Interviewers don't just want to hear what you think your strengths are, but will likely ask for concrete situations within like a context. They want to know what your personal strengths are. You know what I mean? And how engaged you were and how you solved problems or overcame obstacles. Reflect on these. Maybe writing down as many as you can so that you can go into the interview with like a situation readily prepared in your mind. Be as prepared as possible. Like instead of saying a strength is that I'm detail oriented, give a concrete example. In my previous job, I was responsible for double checking all the figures in our monthly budgets. You know what I'm saying? In several cases, I caught errors that would have cost our company significant money. See, this attention to detail will serve you well in this position, and they will get a better idea of your strengths. Do not try to spin. See, potential employers are not stupid and can see right through this cliche attempt. They sometimes interview hundreds of people for a position, and everyone's first instinct is to use what they believe is a strength and spin it as a weakness. However, what you see as strengths may not seem that way to employers, who are often looking for employees who value things like flexibility and teamwork. This type of response can often make it seem like you lack self-awareness. There are very common spins out there that you need to be mindful of, like, I'm a perfectionist and I can't stand to get things wrong. See, perfectionism is unlikely to strike employers as a true strength, as it suggests that you hold yourself and others to unreasonable standards and may also have trouble with procrastination. I'm stubborn and I don't let things go. This may suggest that you are not good at being flexible and adaptable. I struggle to maintain a good work-life balance because I work so hard. See, this may suggest that you can't take care of yourself and are more likely to burn out or be an unpleasant colleague. Be honest about your weaknesses, right? We're always in the defensive. We don't need to be. Be honest. You're either going to get it or you ain't going to get it. But the most prepared people are usually successful, but you got to be honest. When the interviewer asks you a question about your weakness, be honest. There wouldn't be any point in asking the question if all you gave the interviewer was some canned response about how awesome you are. The interviewer isn't looking for that. She's looking for a real discussion of things you can work on, a signpost of insight about yourself. Real challenges might include being overly critical, being suspicious of authority of peers, being too demanding, procrastinating, being too talkative, being too sensitive, exhibiting a lack of assertiveness, exhibiting a lack of social tact. Acknowledge the bad parts of your challenges. There are certain parts of these weaknesses that you need to address and speak about how your challenge has affected or could potentially affect your work performance. It shows insight and truthfulness, although you still need to be tactful about what you say. Like, tell them right now, I am a procrastinator. I realize this affects the amount of work that I could get done, as well as potentially the work that my colleagues could get done. In college, I got away with it because I knew the system. I found a way to get through it and still got my work done. I realized that this won't work in this professional world because it's really not a great way to work, meet my goals, and get things done. Show the interviewer how you strive to overcome your challenges. Again, being practical here is better than being idealistic. Given the idealistic response could seem unrealistic and can make you seem like you are trying to talk yourself up. Like, tell the interviewer, I'm taking serious steps to curb my habit of procrastination. I'm setting artificial deadlines for myself and offering personal incentives to meet those deadlines. This has considerably helped my issue. Talk about those strengths with confidence. Do that. You should sound self assured, but not cocky. Try to be confident while still playing humble about your achievements and skills. Of course, try to truthfully pick strengths that could be in line with the individual business or organization to which you are applying. Real strengths fall into three main categories: knowledge based skills, such as computer skills, language, or technical know how; transferable skills, such as communication and people management skills or problem solving; and personal traits, such as sociability, confidence, and punctuality. Now, I'd like you to provide examples when talking about strength. It's all well and good to say that you have amazing people skills, but it's another thing to show it. Illustrate what your strengths look like in real life by providing examples, either from your personal interactions or from your work history. Like, I'm an excellent communicator. I care about the words that I use and about avoiding ambiguity when I communicate. I'm not afraid to follow up with someone who's senior to me when I don't understand them. I take the time to imagine how different people might interpret questions or statements differently. You can also demonstrate your strengths and skills set by sharing what went well in the past and where you have succeeded in your efforts. If you have won any awards or acknowledgments, you can mention them too. You see, there are important reasons why you should understand and identify your strengths and weaknesses. It can be applied in various areas in your life, and I strongly recommend that you take some of the suggested steps that the counselor mentioned today. It's in your best interest. I mean, when do we sit back and even look at where our happiness is or our desires? We had them when we were younger, but do you still hold them? I hear people talking about, oh, when I was younger, I had this. And sometimes they talk as if their life is over when it's not. You might have gotten to a place, maybe you went off course. But if you still got breath in your lungs, you might be able to still, you know what I mean? And why do you have to have the whole pie? Maybe you're working, you wanted to be like in music, but you ended up being in business. So maybe you could start taking some music lessons. You know, you don't have to do all the transition into a different career. Sometimes it's just happiness, having a little bit of happiness in that desire. You know what I mean? That desire could be achieved in certain ways that just fulfill you and just give you nice balance in your life. You might be in a career that you feel essential to commit and serve other people, and it's great. And you know what? I don't recommend you straying from that course. However, I do think you can enhance your life. And if you do that, that's wonderful. So, I want to say to my listeners, I really appreciate you listening. And there's a lot to think about. But I think I know we all have strengths and weaknesses. But the word weakness is something that can be improved upon. And that's the great thing. And remember, don't be afraid to make mistakes. We're living in a society where there's so many people worried about messing up or making the mistakes or the world's going to fall apart. Learn to make mistakes and improve. And really, the truth is, you do improve when you make many mistakes. You know what I mean? You do learn. You're always learning something. Okay? So keep that in mind. And remember, be like the wise old bird and spread the word. So please take care of yourself. And I'd like you to go to allmylinks.com/the CLSR, right? And check me out. Get some gear. You know, check out my podcast. Get some information. All right? So take care of yourself.